This morning we are up bright and early as we will be climbing up Hallasan. We wanted to make sure that we could get a lot at the upper car park, which was closer to the entrance. Considering that we had not trained prior to coming to Korea, we chose to take the simplest, the least challenging route, which was going to be Yeongsil route. It was pretty cold this morning, especially at the lower part of the hike when we would still be covered by the trees and not exposed to the sun yet. The trail was well maintained and there's nothing too challenging or too technical for now. A bit of a spoiler that my cardio hasn't been very great and I would actually fail to complete this hike. So you can see on this map that it looks like a pretty gentle slope, but there's plenty of stairs, and before long you get exposed to the sun and things start to get tougher and tougher. On the other hand, my wife, her best friend, as well as my mother-in-law were handling this hike pretty well, and if it weren't for me, I'm sure they would have hit where we needed to go.
I think you must pen to the beginning. What? We are still so far away.
The flight of stairs up the ridge line seemed almost unending, and eventually we decided that I had to throw in the towel, but the views were pretty much worth it, so do come prepared. Next, we traded the mountain view for a view of the coast because we were in search of abalone porridge. It's a standalone business run by a solo ajuma, and that means that it's probably going to be more authentic and less touristy. And banchan was served as well before the porridge came. There's no mistaking the distinctive greenish hue of the abalone porridge that gets served here at Jeju. It may not look the most appetizing, but it was a very hearty meal. Looking around, you can't help but feel that this place might have been frozen in time for a decade or two. There weren't any printed menus, and the pricing was just written on whiteboards that were hung around the shop. We didn't know what else was being sold here, but in any case, we were just here for the porridge. After lunch, it was time to go for a walk, and looking at the coastline and looking at the rocks peeking out of the water, you're reminded of the history of the island, that Jeju Island is a volcanic island born out of a volcanic eruption, and all around you can see the black color basalt that lines the coast. When you look into the distance, you are reminded that you are not the first here, neither will you be the last visitor, because plenty of people have come by and done a fair bit of rock stacking. It was a pity that the waters weren't pristine and there was a fair bit of rubbish that had been washed up on the shoreline. This trip would not be complete without a warm cup of coffee in our hands as we stare out into the horizon and listen to the wind and the waves. This cafe that we had chosen had its own backyard of sorts, which felt like a fever dream. I mean, check out the abandoned bed, piano, as well as a bathtub in the middle of nowhere. You can totally imagine someone shooting a music video here. Leaving the wilderness, it was time to head back to civilization and visit a market. You're going to have to pardon my shaky footage, as it was a little bit of a whirlwind tour at the start when we were just checking out the different stores and seeing the kind of seafood that was available here. There were live squids being kept in tanks, and we even had the chance to see cutlass fish on ice, and that was a delicacy that we had here on our very first day. Apart from the seafood, you could also find spices and condiments being sold here, and as we explored deeper into the market, we saw braised meat. One thing of interest to me was that some of the storekeepers would actually put up signage that said that you can actually speak to them in Mandarin, and there were others that had actually even hired Chinese store assistants to deal with the tourists. After we bought some instant noodles as well as confectionery, we chanced upon this chocolate store and we tried some of the Udo peanut chocolates and the tangerine chocolates, and it was great. There's also some bonus footage that I recorded here of what it looks like in one of their local convenience stores. because the shelves were fully stocked and it looked colorful and symmetrical, and I just wanted to shoot a bit. Did you know that spam is a staple in South Korean culture and it's given as a gift? If you didn't know, I suggest reading the Wikipedia article. It's pretty interesting. After exploring the market, it was time to head back to the car, and we decided that we would be just aimlessly wandering, checking out different back alleys until it was time for dinner. We found this souvenir shop in one of the back alleys, and it turns out that the store owner herself is the artist who paints some of these designs. In the end, we decided to get sushi because the reviews on Google Maps and Naver Maps was pretty decent, and a small queue had started to form prior to dinner service. The menus were entirely in Korean, so we had to use Google Translate on our phones to figure out what we were going to order. We were seated in front of the counter and could see our food being freshly prepared. As you can see from the menu here, the types of sushi was pretty extensive and covered things like hand rolls as well as gunkan and nigiri. My wife and I settled for some safe picks, so we got our favorites like tamago, swordfish, salmon, scallop, shrimps, as well as a side of tempura. On this day, we had made our way over to Busan already, and you can see my friend is no longer at the wheel, and it's a taxi driver. It almost looks a bit like Singapore, doesn't it? I was not sure how we found ourselves here for lunch, but this particular place was serving a set lunch, which we gladly ordered. After lunch, we went in search of another cafe to have our coffee, but all we managed to find in the vicinity was a chain. This particular Tom and Tom's was almost completely empty, and we had the entire upper floor all to ourselves. If I recall correctly, after that we decided to retreat back to the Airbnb. After the sun had gone down, we re-emerged into the darkness like vampires on this rainy night, and we went in search of food on a touristy street. The rain clearly did not dampen the mood of tourists like ourselves, and there were plenty of people out there trying to find somewhere to eat and checking out a shop like this which sold tableware. Apparently there's a very famous eel restaurant along the street which we did not try. There was also plenty of other standard fried food that you'll find at a night market. This marks the end of our first day in Busan, and for the rest of the night we just spent time walking, looking at shops, and eventually we found this place to have our very light dinner of pancakes. And later when we headed back to the main street, the ladies wanted to check out Olive Young, so I spent time by myself, people watching. I'll see you in the next video.